Several new movies are set to hit theaters in China during the upcoming Spring Festival, as the film industry hopes for a box office revival after last year's slump. Well, according to the China Film Administration, revenue fell by almost a quarter, deepening its post-pandemic downturn, while it grossed about $5.8 billion, down from the $7.5 billion in 2023. And for more, we are joined now by Yin Wenyan, Assistant Professor, Seoul Business School, Assist University, and CNA's Lauren Ong in Beijing. Well, welcome to East Asia tonight. So, Lauren, let's just start with you first. Tell us a little bit more about these numbers.
Well, Telly, to put things into perspective, you really have to look at the box office figures over the past 6 years. In 2024, at about 42.5 billion yuan, that's about $5.8 billion for the 2024's box office sale. And it's disappointing because it kind of shows that the post-pandemic recovery that the film industry has been hoping for isn't really lifting off. Now you need to look at 2019 numbers. You see that it hit almost $9 billion, and that's a record high. But this upward momentum was sort of disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and you see the 2020 to 2022 numbers underperforming. But interestingly, the film industry was actually banking on a post-pandemic boom. You see multiple theaters increasing the number of screens they have, upgrading their technology in projectors. So 2 years on, you see that this post-pandemic boom hasn't really materialized, and you can see why there's disappointment from that. Well, from 2023, there's some glimmer of optimism as we see the box office sales go up to about $7.5 billion. But this is mostly because of the backlog of films from the pandemic and the first time that people can go to the theaters in a long time. So it kind of contributed to the uptick. So in 2025, what's it like in the movies in China? Well, I went to the movies over the weekend. Let's have a listen.
It's a Saturday night at the heart of Beijing's central business district. In one corner is a well-known cinema chain known for hosting movie premieres and familiar to large crowds. According to ticketing apps, the movie Octopus with Broken Arms ranks among the top in the box office chart. It is a locally produced thriller that was released in late December. But even then, the number of empty seats tells a different story. A worrying trend that is observed across other films on offer.
Now, I've been monitoring this Chinese ticketing app called Damai, checking seating availability in various cinemas in Beijing, and more often than not, whether it's a Friday night or the weekend, it seems that less than 50% of the seats are filled.
Throughout 2024, about 1.01 billion went to the movies, down from almost 1.3 billion a year earlier. This falls short of industry insiders' hopes for a sustained recovery following improvements seen in 2023. It was the fourth highest box office in history, following a record number of films released from the pandemic backlog.
一年可能2-3次这样。
不经常。
为什么呢？
没钱，也不太喜欢看吧。一个人看没有意思，也没有时间去看。
没有时间看。
没有时间。没有在影院看是吗？
就过年的时候会看，2-3次吧，就是年前年后的。
Film industry leaders from across China called for more reform last week, encouraging more movies that resonate with audiences and to tap the international market. All this comes as China continues to face a weak domestic consumption that has sunk to record lows. Accounting for more than half of China's GDP, it's one of the biggest drags in China's economy.
Well, the 2024 box office numbers sort of wraps up incentives you've seen across the country, including free movie tickets, as well as festivals to promote films and the supply of films, distribution of films. But last August, you also saw that promoting films was actually part of broader plans laid out by the State Council, China's highest administrative governing body, to boost domestic consumption in general. And in March, you see that film regulators have actually committed to being more open when it comes to film imports. And even during the Olympics, you see movie theaters screening the Olympics to try to increase footfall. So, Professor, a question to you. Despite all these measures throughout the year, why do you think there's still a slump in the box office sales?
Thank you for having me. Despite the government's measures to boost domestic consumption, however, these measures are not enough. As shown in the show, actually, these measures, because are primarily focusing on the consumption side, but actually we need to also address some other more fundamental factors, such as supply and competition-related factors. So regarding the supply side, actually, Chinese filmmakers are not competitive enough to satisfy the evolving consumer taste. Consumers actually are not just satisfied with the star-driven films, but they are looking for better quality contents. And from the competition side, actually, the platforms actually can provide more convenient and also affordable contents. And these contents actually are particularly appealing to the consumers, particularly during the difficult economic times. So, and such kind of change and shift in consumer behavior has further negatively affect the cinema attendance. So I would emphasize one is supply and the other is competition. The alternative channels of content consumption have negatively affect such kind of result.
So, Lauren, we heard there from Professor Yin that those government measures aren't quite enough. Consumer tastes are evolving. So then what exactly is the industry doing to boost sales?
Well, domestic films in particular have been largely poorly received by the local audience. And like what Professor Yin said just now, many of these reasons point to the content. Even the movie I went to, The Octopus with Broken Arms, the cast and crew admitted during interviews that this was a criticism that they were aware of. And instead, they chose to sort of focus on improving the storyline to make it more unpredictable. And these sentiments, you've seen them online, you've seen them on even Chinese local state media. And according to an editorial on China Daily, it says that audiences are actually tired of movies having similar themes. And it attributes this to the lack of creativity, mostly conjured by excessive caution that these films might get them into trouble, and as a result, excessive, what it calls unnecessary intervention by the local governments because of that. So what does it take for patrons to actually go to the movies? Well, I spoke to some of them. Let's have a listen.
主要还是看片儿是什么样子的吧，上映的是什么样子的，会比较挑一些。
没什么兴趣，而且有些喜欢的根本引进不进来。就像以前我看一些像《寄生虫》这种电影，它是引进不过来的。
今天除非是有一部电影就是看的人比较多，然后就是票房比较高的，我才会去看。
Also help us understand this, Professor. Do you think it's also got to do with regulations? I mean, are they getting stricter?
Yes. In order to address this question, I would like to look back at the historical evolution of Chinese industry development. In more recent years, it seems like Chinese government regulations have been stricter in this industry. However, if we look back to the early 1990s, when the film industry was on the verge of bankruptcy, and Chinese government actually, in order to save this kind of industry and liberalize the industry by allowing the 10 most globally very successful blockbusters. And that actually has really contributed to the revival of the industry. So I think when the industry slowdown continues and the government could be very responsive to this kind of situation, instead of restricting the regulation even further, I would say that there could be loosening of the regulation in order to encourage the industry development.
Well, Professor, Well, Professor, thank you. Actually, adding to your point, we actually see that some of these re-releases are seeing netizens are complaining about deleted scenes and changes to storylines. So, but I do want to ask, like, how marketable do you think China films are overseas? And is it going to be a viable way to boost revenue, given that it hasn't seen much success domestically?
Yes, great question again. In order to address this question, I would also first draw on some successful experiences of Hollywood films and also recently emerging Korean wave. So in order to achieve global success, we need to actually maximize the global appeal of content and features, as seen, we can see from the Korean wave and also Hollywood filmmakers. They are not maximizing the national identity, but global appeal, actually. But back to Chinese films, actually, we can see that Chinese government try to maximize the Chinese elements, but this kind of strategy may not be very attractive for the global audience. So far, Chinese films are not so attractive in the global market, although Chinese government has been doing a lot of efforts and to increase the portion of the export of domestic films in the overseas market. But I think in order to increase increase the global appeal of Chinese films, not just Chinese government but also Chinese filmmakers may need to change their approach and strategy and when developing their films.
Right. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this conversation, but thank you both for your insights. Yin Wenyan, Assistant Professor, Seoul Business School, Assist University, and of course CNA's Lauren Ong in Beijing.